Okay, good afternoon. Welcome. We are here today for our plenary panel. We have some really great women here. The title of the panel is The Embodiment of Your Authentic Self at Work. My name is Tricia Walker. I am proud to be the Region H Governor, as well as Supplier Quality Engineering Manager at Medtronic. Happy to be moderating today's panel with these lovely women. The session today is sponsored by Rockwell Automation, so let's give a hand to Rockwell. And I'm going to introduce our distinguished panelists. And the first panel member's name is Barbra Colsonheimer. Barbra Colsonheimer has been working in the medical device and pharmaceutical industry for the past 20 years. Her experience includes roles in quality assurance, technical writing, usability engineering, systems engineering, and project and program management, working for Datex, Omeda, GE Healthcare, Baxter Healthcare, and Space Labs Healthcare. Barb is currently the Director of Program Management for North Star Medical Radioisotopes. She holds a BS in Biology from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, a BS in Biomedical Engineering from Milwaukee School of Engineering, and MBA from the University of Wisconsin, Whitewater. So welcome, Barb. Stacy Delvecchio. Stacy Delvecchio is the Additive Manufacturing Product Manager for Caterpillar, leveraging the technology in all spaces, including new product introduction, supply chain, and operations. Her team is focused on deploying the technology by working with Caterpillar product groups on design for additive. Delvecchio manages the Additive Manufacturing Factory, which has a wide range of printing capabilities. In her 29 years at Caterpillar, she started when she was 13, by the way. Delvecchio has had numerous positions in engineering and manufacturing, including the build and startup for a greenfield facility in China. Very cool. Stacy holds a BS in chemical engineering from the University of Cincinnati in Ohio. She was the 2013-2014 president of the Society of Women Engineers and named a fellow of the society in 2015. Delvecchio is the secretary of the Women in Engineering Committee for the World Federation of Engineering Organization, representing the American Association of Engineering Societies. So welcome, Stacy. Sorry, this is like, I swear it's advancing 2 slides when I hit it once. Christina Cameto. Christina Cameto, MS, works with engineers and technical leaders to hone their communication, presentation, and social presence skills, preparing them for what's next in their career trajectories. As a program director with the Department of Engineering Professional Development at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, she leads an online graduate certificate that helps professionals realize their leadership potential, while not breaking stride in their careers. Over the past year, she has launched a new innovation toolkit workshop and designed a 12-month custom program to manage and support IDP formal learning plans for corporate partners. Her co-authored book, Slide Rules, Design, Build, and Archive Technical Presentations, presents a unique approach to presentation design that has been adopted by numerous professionals and organizations worldwide. Welcome, Christine. Okay, so we are going to, start out with some questions, but I want you to start thinking about questions that you may have. And because we have a really workable room, we'll take a mic, pass it, etc. But we're going to start with some starter questions and just kind of work from there. So the first one, how do you maintain a professional persona without losing your authentic self? What does authenticity look like for you? And I am going to have actually Barb start with this one.
All right. They did give us these questions in advance, and I actually didn't care for that question. And I do have 2 books on authentic leadership. They're both written by Bill George, who was the CEO of Medtronic. And he actually wrote a description of what he thought authentic leadership meant. And I'd actually like to start with that, if that's
great.
So he described it as people who are true to themselves and to what they believe in. They engender trust and develop genuine connections with others. Because people trust them, they are able to motivate others to high levels of performance. Rather than letting the expectations of other people guide them, they are prepared to be their own person and go their own way. As they develop as authentic leaders, they are more concerned about serving others than they are about their own success or recognition. And I guess that description to me did not mean that it's mutually exclusive from being professional. I felt that you can be an authentic leader and be professional, and they can be one and the same. So that was why I didn't care for the question, because it almost sounded like you can't be professional if you're going to be true to yourself, which I don't think is necessarily true.
Very good. Sorry, this presentation is on a loop, I think. That's what's happening right now. So I'm trying to...
Would you mind repeating the name and the author of that?
Oh, sure. Bill George. This is True North. Actually, I think that was the second book he wrote. Sorry, I just turned it off. True North is one of them, and Authentic Leadership is the other. Bill George is the author of both.
We'll see if that... I know it's looping. I don't know. Well, I'll just try to manage it as best as I can. No problem. Thank you, Barb, for that. Okay, so anyone else want to take that one and expand on it a little bit? Christine?
Sure. I actually really liked the way that Barb handled that one, and I agree. I don't think that any of that needs to be mutually exclusive. And yet, I think, when I work with graduate professionals coming to our master's programs at UW-Madison, and many times if they're very early in their careers, sometimes they do think that it has to be mutually exclusive, like they have to hide part of themselves or maybe not be quite as honest about who they are. And I think that we really have to recognize that that can be a tendency and fight against it. Maintain what we know to be the direction we want to go in, and look for those mentors, right, on the horizon. And in every situation we're in, we might not always have that mentor in our sightline. That means that we just have to keep looking. And I think that that's one of the things that I know has helped me and many of the people that I work with really embrace that authentic self and eventually authentic leadership.
Really great. Thank you so much, Christine. Okay, so we'll move to question 2. And for those that are coming in the room, we do have some set questions that we're going to work through, but I really encourage you to think of ones that you would like to ask, and we'll do that after we're done with these as well. Okay, so the second question, do you embrace the idea of being your authentic self at the office? Why or why not? And I would like Stacy to answer this one.
So yes, absolutely, be your authentic self. I'm not sure I know any other way to be. So part of that might just be my own, survival mode. But I also think that people know when you're faking it. And even if you think you're faking it, and they know it. It's really hard to be genuine and really care if you're not being your authentic self. And so if you don't do that, it goes back to the trust, it goes back to, enjoying your work, kind of that whole life purpose. And I really think if you're not authentic and true to yourself, you just add another level of a stress to your life. Mm-hmm. And life's too stressful as it is, so you can cut that out by not having this like fake it mode. Then that's really good. I was actually at a casual meeting with some people, and it actually happened to be more men, but they were talking about, I'm this way at work, and I'm teaching my sons that they have to be this way at work, but they can be this way at home or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But then I thought, well, what happens like if you met somebody at home and then they have to work with them at work, and so then like you have to treat them this way at home and this way at work, and I'm like, I don't need that in my life.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, it's the same.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think that's really great, and good perspective, right? You know, and I think you said it best when you're like, who else do I know to be, right? And I think that's good to recognize that and not overcomplicate it, right? Okay, perfect. Next question. Okay. How do you achieve professional success by embodying your authentic self? And actually, I would love for each of you to have a piece in this question. So maybe we'll start with Barb.
I was hoping you'd pick somebody else first. I guess I do have concerns with being truly authentic at work, and I know I talked about the few people at lunch about this too. I'm learning that if I'm my total normal self, I'm going to limit myself in a corporate environment. So there are occasions where you just have to conform a little bit. I'm a very direct, very honest person. I'm very transparent. I tell people what they want to know, you know, within reason. There's things you obviously can't share. But people respect that. People like that. People like that as a leader. They like following someone that they know where that person is going. They know what that person is thinking. But there's some things you need to kind of message a different way, and understanding how to do that is probably the harder part for me. So I kind of hit that wall on, ooh, I can't quite say that word. I need to phrase that a different way. How do I phrase that so people can accept it and they still understand it, but it's done more in a positive light? So that's the hard piece for me is I want to be authentic. I just want to tell them what I think, but then I have to stop and think, how do I message that? How do I make that sound more positive than maybe what it really is?
Yeah, really great. Christine.
Yeah, again, I would agree with Barb in that I think, sometimes think that we are all really adept at emotional intelligence, and yet there are blind spots. And actually, I've learned a lot about mine in the last 18 months or so. One of my best friends is an industrial psychologist, and she's practiced worldwide, and she has really helped. About 18 months ago, she sort of started coaching me. Maybe she thought I needed it, but she started coaching me when I would tell her these scenarios that I was dealing with at work. She would start just subtly asking me questions like, well, you know, what if you thought about it this way? And what she was really coaching me on was empathy, and to build up my empathy in my emotional intelligence, because I do tend to be a good listener, but I wasn't getting at the empathy piece. And to help me in communicating with certain folks who, again, I tend to be very direct, very transparent. You almost always know what I'm thinking, and that can be a very bad thing with certain people. So I had to learn to temper that just a little bit. And with her help, I feel like I've really started to learn a little bit more about situations where I do need to stop, take a breath, think about how I need to deliver the message, how it's going to be heard best. And that's really what communication is about, right? It's not about me being authentic to what I want to say, but me knowing what I want to say and delivering it in a professional way so that the other person's going to hear it. And that's what I've worked a lot on, and I feel like I'm getting better. I hope I'm getting better. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so that empathy piece, and that's what I heard. So a couple key things that I got from what you just said. So first of all, listening, right? You know that we need to be good listeners. We talk about that. You know, we have 2 ears, 1 mouth, et cetera, right? But taking it an extra step, right? And having that empathy, really looking at the other person and how they are going to receive it, I think is really key on that. So thanks. Stacy?
I find it interesting because I'm also a very you can see what I'm thinking on my face, you know, and so it's funny, all three of us are that way. And when I think, and that's part of my, you know, being my authentic self, is that I have always felt strongly that as an employee, no matter what level I am in the company, I'm an expert in my job, and if I don't share what I think is the right thing to do, then how is the CEO, if nobody tells the CEO what the real scoop is, how is he really supposed to run this company? And then I also coach people, that doesn't mean you need to stand up at an all-employee meeting and say, you're a stinking idiot for doing that. But one of the things that I struggle with, so I'm out there, but I'm also, you can see my expression really quick. So somebody might be talking and I'll be like, like for those of you that can't see me, I'm like, making this face like, what is this person doing? And it's bad, especially if you happen to work for me and your boss is doing that. It's very disengaging if they're my employee. So what I've had to do, the tempering that I have to do, is just a little bit of a pause. And I only need about 5 seconds to pause, and I can get that under control, but it's probably a lifelong challenge. I'm not sure I'll ever get there. But if I can pause for just a few seconds, I can get it under a little bit better control. And I go, what? What'd you just say? Like as if, that was the dumbest thing in the world you just said, and not really mean it. But so that's kind of, but I still feel I'm being authentic to myself because I'm getting the message out there. I just need a little bit of a pause to make it so it's not so brutal.
Right. And I think that, based on what you said, Stacy, so I think at times we are scared to maybe take that moment, and that pause, can make a difference between either the message or what they hear, or, et cetera. So I think that's important, and to allow us to have that is equally important, I think, yeah.
And I also think sometimes the dress code is like so much more relaxed now than it used to be, but it was a little bit more stifling even as recently as 10 years ago. And I always thought one way just to kind of just have a little fun with myself, I'd wear fun socks, or there's mismatched socks from several years ago. And a friend of mine's like, you're wearing those mismatched socks to work? And I'm like, you bet, because nobody sees them. And
right.
You can kind of be like, this is me.
Yeah. I might have a pair of socks in my suitcase right now that says sassy badassy. So I can relate to that. No one can see them. They were a Christmas gift. So I can appreciate that. Yeah, you do need those, for sure. All right, question 4. How did you step away from being supervisor to everyday person after hours when traveling for work? I found this question very interesting, especially the fact that you three, are saying, hey, I do bring myself, but maybe I, in some capacity back off a little bit, So would like to hear, actually, start with Christine on this one.
Well, I'm probably the least supervisory of the three of us, actually. But I will say that when I travel for work, I'm often at the same place where clients are. So I do a lot of corporate training and corporate workshops. And so a lot of times, I'll be leading a session all day with folks and then be at the same hotel that evening with all the people that I was just training.
Yep.
And I might be seeing the next day. And so I can relate to it in that regard because I still need to have that authority to have them want to learn from me. Mm-hmm. So I think that I do keep a little bit of a buffer. If they're going to be going out past dinner or something like that, I might not do that. I might just go back and get a little bit more sleep, for instance. And that's worked really well for me because even though I do want to connect, I always, in fact, my husband travels a lot for work, and our saying is always, nothing good ever happens after 11 p.m. on a work trip.
It's true.
And it's really true. So, it's just fine to be calling it an early night, and that's worked really well for me.
Yeah, great. Stacy, why don't you?
So I have traveled a lot with people on my team, and part of it, the discussions we have when we travel end up being pretty similar to what we have at work, because I do have one-on-ones, or I'll eat lunch with my team. But it is easy to just start elaborating because you've got more time with them, you're either driving with them or something. So a couple things I avoid is I really, I don't talk about money, because typically, since I am their boss or maybe more senior, I make more money than they do. I'm also married to another engineer who also works at Caterpillar, and we have no kids, so that also means we don't have as many expenses as some people. So we just stay away from the amount of disposable income we have, because it's just awkward. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel like that's compromising myself not to talk about that. And the other thing then is just not to get into that complain mode, because the issues, and I can complain with the best of them, but the issues I might complain about are things that are maybe going to give them less confidence in the leadership team in general, that they don't need to hear about it. So I stay away from those two, and I don't feel like as if that's being, not true to myself. I do think that one of the things, if being your authentic self is like you're a big partier, then you probably have a little bit more that you have to hold back. I tend not to be a big partier, so I'm like, but like I wouldn't go out and get, rip roaring drunk with my team. That would just be like, yeah, nothing good happens. But I don't have that. But I think if, some people like to party more, and I think that's where you'd have to do a little bit more self-check of yourself when you're out with your team in that area. I like your rule. Yeah.
And the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Barb,
She said in the culture,
in the
too.
culture, yeah, depending. Yeah, exactly. Barb, anything to add on this one before we move?
I actually don't like talking about work after work. So if I go out with a team of people from work or people that we work with, I prefer to ask personal questions of them. It helps get to know each other a little bit better, kind of breaks the ice a little bit. It actually breaks down a lot of barriers, so you actually can work better with them. And my mind just wants to shut down at 6 o'clock. I mean, I'll pick up work a little bit later in the evening, but I need a little bit of downtime. So having dinner with somebody, just getting to know them, asking a few personal questions, you can usually get a sense on whether or not they're comfortable disclosing personal things, or if they shut down, fine, change the conversation to something else. But I think it kind of brings a little levity into the situation and really gets you to know that person and them you on a different basis.
Yeah, and you can start with, some easy stuff, right? Like, hey, any weekend plans? Hey, things like that. It's, when we say personal, it's not like you're diving into these personal conversations, but the idea of adding levity, creating that, it becomes more real, right? Like, so if, they have a parent that is going through something or whatnot, you can kind of empathize and listen, and yeah, very good. All right. Are people thinking of their questions? Because you're about ready to be up. Okay, so we've got a couple more, but as I said, I know it's still looping. Not sure what's happening, but it's okay. We're making it work. So if you guys have questions, we'll make sure that we get to those here in a second, and we'll pass the mic and whatnot around the room. Okay, so when managing your team, do you encourage team members to step away from work and discuss their personal life? Why or why not? And what is a healthy balance? Now, we touched on this a little bit, which I'm not surprised, based on the last question. But Stacy, can you take that one first?
Yeah, I think if you are comfortable sharing with your team and your peers a little bit about your personal life, it just makes the day more enjoyable. We all spend a lot of hours at work, and if you enjoy the people you're working with, it's just all the better. If you know that somebody's daughter is getting married and you can ask about the marriage, or if, someone in the family's had a baby, or if somebody's has, a sick parent. And there's all kinds of things that touch on that personal level that is just it's healthy for a team to know that. It also really helps then when, maybe you are a little bit late because you do have a sick parent, and then people aren't like, oh, they're just late again, a slacker. They can have some compassion because they might have gone through a similar situation the year before. So opening up and sharing that is really good, which is, I had a situation with my team last year where there was some bad conflict, and I really wish I could hit the redo button and do it again, because I might have pulled them together a little bit more. But doing things like team lunches and, getting them once a month, we get out of the office and physically go somewhere and have lunch, and it's not slack time. It really builds that team camaraderie. So I think it's critical to have that kind of dynamic with your team, to know more than just what you do that's strictly work related.
Yeah, Christine, anything to add there?
I would just completely agree that we're all human and we have lives, hopefully, and work obviously dictates that you get away from that for a certain number of hours during the day, but it doesn't leave you. So knowing enough about your team in that regard and sharing too. My colleague Susan Ottman gave a talk about mastering the transition earlier today, and I liked the way that she talked about, they have to know you're human too, because that's important. That's important for everybody to know some of the joys and struggles. So I would totally agree that it's a healthy balance. I liked some of the things that you talked about earlier, staying away from, and I would agree with those, but within reason. Yeah.
And Barb?
So actually, at my last position, I was a director of engineering for a small team, all men, mind you. And each week on Monday, I would pick a name out of the box and take that person out to lunch on Friday. So it was up to them where we went, but the whole point was as soon as we leave the office, we don't talk about work unless they bring it up. So it gave us a chance to kind of know each other personally, one-on-one. It gave them a chance to figure out who I was. And I could tell some people weren't comfortable with disclosing some personal things, so we'd talk about other things. But I got really great feedback from the entire team on that. It made them see me as a person, not just their manager. Also uncovered areas that we had similarities, commonalities, but also, like you had mentioned, it gives you that chance to say, oh, so how are things going with your wife now or your child? Or, you know a little bit more about them personally, and it helps you be a better manager, honestly.
Yeah, and I couldn't have said it better, because if you, and I love that idea about the Monday to Friday, it sounds like people knew about it, right? So it wasn't like, on Friday, they'd catch on after a while anyway. I'm rotating, But I think that's important. And the one-on-one is important. I think so too, because, the transparency there, right, if you're not competing with others. So I think that was a really great idea. All right. Last question before we go to the audience. Have you read any articles or books that have helped you manage your personal and professional life and achieving your authentic self? Barb? Barb has a couple books.
I do have a couple books, which I already shared. And I like reading business books because I just think they give you a lot of insight. One of the things that really hasn't come up in our discussion yet is that authentic leadership is also based on constantly evaluating yourself and improving yourself. So there's always things you can do better. There's always feedback that's going to be helpful, whether it's hard to take or easy to take. But really kind of breaking that down and understanding what it was that might have either offended someone or might have been taken the wrong way. Understanding that and figuring out how to change that, how to remedy that situation is very important.
Awesome. Christine?
I want to like reading business books, but I don't.
I'm right there. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you.
To be real honest. But what I mentioned earlier that I've been kind of getting mentorship from my friend on my emotional intelligence and in particular my empathy. And I've discovered that I do like reading business psychology and that I do like reading about that. So I've been kind of anything I can get my hands on lately about emotional intelligence and about empathy. I've been really digesting a ton of that lately, and also knowing myself. So my friend has helped give me several different assessments, and we've been talking through those so that I could understand a little bit more about how I'm wired, so that I can understand how I'm going to react. And believe it or not, I was shocked at some of the things I learned about myself through those assessments. And I would definitely recommend, if you have the opportunity to do them, take advantage of that, because it's shocking actually how we think we're self-aware, but then there's all these hidden pockets of things that we don't know. So that's been really valuable to me lately.
Excellent.
I haven't read any book specifically on authenticity, but the one that kind of helped me in the journey, it's called Soar with Your Strengths by Clifton. And I actually was supposed to read it when years ago I had a Gallup interview done where they tell you like what your strengths are, and we were doing it to help with some leadership selection. And when I was going through the process, and has anybody ever had that? It's like a phone call where they like ask you a bunch of these weird questions, and And so I'm going through so I'm surprised nobody else raised their hand hardly except for one person, but and me got paid. And so when I was going through the process, I was like, this is ridiculous. How are these people going to know who I am? This is the most like uninspiring thing I've ever done. I mean, it was like awful. And then they give me the results, and I was like, oh my gosh, I could have had this interview when I was 18 years old, and it would have been exactly the same. It was like freaky. And the whole concept is I have strengths. Those are my strengths. like soar with your strengths, and you need to have certain like table stakes with the other stuff, but don't worry about like always fixing your weaknesses. Just like soar with your strengths and pull the other things in. So one of the things that I had learned, I'm kind of like, let's get to work, the heck with this like fluffy stuff and everything. And so I'm not one of those people that goes in and says, so how was your weekend? And if the person starts going on, I have like no tolerance, and then I can't like back out of the conversation. And so I'll just go, yeah. And so I would just like go in and be, and I care about Trisha. Trisha's my friend, but I don't have a lot of tolerance to hear 20 minutes on how her weekend was. And so, but they gave me some tools to be like, people need to know you care. So, all right, so that's not your strength, but because I do care, but they said people don't know you care because you launch into like, did you get that thing done? I know it's really hard. Oh yeah, I know you had a vacation, but let's hear about this. And so it's just to like how to temper that and let them know I care, but not belaboring the whole point on and on. And so but it helped me with that as far as what my strengths are. And then the book kind of just let me be like, okay, just run with it. And so it's not really a book about authenticity, but it is a book about running with your strengths, which I think is a very similar sort of concept.
Yeah, I completely agree. And so that sounded like, Stacy, a book kind of assessment combo, right? Where you're able to, right? So, and there's a lot out there in respect to those types of things. And one, just to add, that we do at Medtronic is called Insights. And I don't know if has anyone heard of it? Insights? Okay, and it's color. It's colors. So, and what I really found beneficial out of that particular assessment is the tools that you get out of it. So the situational stuff where you can practice and either with team or colleagues, or if you have folks that report to you, et cetera. And in our business unit, I've kind of become an expert in it because I've seen the value of actually knowing people and knowing, what they are, what color they are. And so I'm sitting here and I go, yep, Stacy is fiery red. And because, so what's interesting is, in that color scheme, the show me you care, the, be brief, be bright, be gone, but yes, I care, but gosh, we have work to get done. And it's really cool to understand that about yourself and others and not try to be something that you're not, and that's what this is really. Yeah, absolutely.
So I mentor a lot of people, and I have a lot of people approach me at Caterpillar asking if, I'll be their mentor, and we'll sit down and talk and everything. And some people who I've sat down with, and I ask them like what they want to be, and, what I can do to help them, or that sort of thing. And like there was one woman, this has happened multiple times, but one woman in particular was complete opposite from me. Very, very, very deep technical. She might have had a PhD, I don't remember, but very technical, very much an introvert. I didn't know her well enough to know if she had a bunch of strong leadership or not, but I mean, she's just very different from me. And she's like, and she was telling me, I like your career, I want to have your career. And, I see what sort of jobs you've had, and I'd like to emulate my career after that. And it's like, I didn't sense that was the right path for her, but she saw what I had done and wanted to do it. And it's really hard, find yourself and run with that versus trying to just copy somebody.
Very good. Yeah, no, I think that's, awesome. Okay, so we're going to now open it up to questions from the audience, and I will grab a microphone. Oh, perfect. Actually, Jean's going to do it. Woo! This is exciting. We can manage, absolutely. So who wants to start us off with a question? Oh, wonderful.
Hello. Have you ever been in a position where your values might contradict those of the company or the job role that you were in? And if so, how did you go about managing that?
So when I think of that question, I think about different companies. And so maybe, Barb, do you want to?
It sounds like Christine has a good one here. I don't think I've really actually come across that situation where something really, truly went against my values. I mean, I might disagree with somebody, but not on values.
Yeah, so now I'm thinking about how to tell this story without implicating anyone. But very early in my career, I was managing a federal grant at a very small institution in a different state. But As I got into my role further, I discovered that there was something a little odd about the way the financials were being run. And as I looked into it more, the institution was siphoning some dollars that, this was a federal grant, and it was a private institution, and that was illegal. And I was, as I kind of started to feel this out a little more, and I was very young in my career, as I started to feel this out a little more with leadership, I was essentially told, shut up. You're just going to be quiet about this. You're just going to run this because you got a really great position going here. And I was also told at one point, if you really push this, your career is done. So there were threats. And, it's a pretty extreme example, but it ended up me and the president of the institution in a room together. And with the final straw for me, honestly, was, he was a PhD and he had been at the institution for a really long time. He actually had close friends who were leaders of other nations. And here I was in my early 20s looking at him. And, as many academic institutions do, their presidents often will teach from time to time too. Guess what his teaching was? Ethics. Yeah. And so we're sitting in his office, and he's sitting at his desk, and I'm sitting across from him, and he's bullying me to shut up. And all I see in the bookcases behind him are books on ethics. And I just said, here's how this is going to go down. You are going to extricate from this grant completely over the next couple months. I'm going to lay out this timeline. If you don't, the office of what's the office of? Thank you. Yes, will be here, and the inspector will be auditing you. And I know of a case where an institution got shut down for this. So, do you want to be next? And he eventually agreed to that plan, and I eventually left very quickly. Yeah. But I felt it was my role to do that, to say, no, I'm not going to do this, nor am I going to let it continue, because I know this is wrong. It goes against what I believe in, and nothing you say is going to change my mind on that. So it's not easy. You're going to feel really awful. It was one of the darkest times in my life, honestly. But I do believe it's the only way to get by. Mm-hmm. You have to do it that way. Because I wouldn't have felt good about any other situation.
Yeah, and so touching upon that, this is all about being our authentic self, right? So that was something that you clearly, as most of us, if not all of us, would have done, a similar thing, right? I actually have an example as well, and unfortunately, it sometimes does result in you leaving. And in my situation, I did as well. A small company wasn't aligned with the board, if you will, and some decisions that they made, and I saw an opportunity to move companies. And really, it actually ended up being great, and there was no ill feelings and whatnot, but I was really straight with them. Like, look, I've seen some things over the last couple months, and this is how I need to be true to myself, and I'm moving on, right? So unfortunately, it may end that way, but you need to be that authentic self, right? So, do you have an example, Stacy? No. Okay. Next question.
Kind of along those same lines, has there ever been a time when you were your authentic self and it maybe got you in some hot water? And if so, in hindsight, would you have handled the situation differently?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say this was fairly early in my career too, but it's more the communication style that we've been talking to before and how I can be very direct. And I was in a position where my boss was leaving the organization, and we had a meeting with his boss, so it was the general manager at the time, and I confronted him in front of the whole team. Why is he leaving? What happened here that he's leaving? And, it wasn't until after that obviously I was made aware that that's probably not the venue for that. Probably should have taken him, aside one-to-one and asked him that type of a question. At that time, I really needed to kind of show that I was a leader of the team and maybe ask a more basic question or something that was a little less confrontational. So I did feel that asking those types of questions in that type of venue did limit where I would go, at least with that general manager. So.
Yeah.
So I think through most of my career, asked those type of questions, and unfortunately, I've never had a mentor or somebody that would step up and say, don't do that there, or even coach me through it. And as I reflect upon my career, I wonder if it has limited me, and I wish somebody would have come back and said that. Now, I hesitate a little bit to share that with you because I also think, it's like we're talking about being your authentic self, and it's like, and if you feel like you've been stifled because you couldn't ask some question, then that's not the point of it. But sometimes it is making sure that you step back and couch it and ask it in a professional manner to try to still get your point across. But and then even ask for maybe some coaching afterwards, which is something I didn't know to do because I didn't even know that maybe I was doing something limiting.
Yeah, and I think the key to that is to recognize maybe at the end of a situation, that, okay, this really didn't go that well, right? Why didn't it go that well? And if you can't point it out, right, to your point, Stacy, reach out to someone involved in that scenario. It's worth the 10-minute, 15-minute conversation to get clarity around that. Christine, did you have an example that you can think of?
Probably not a specific one, a lot like what Stacy and Barb said, that they, we all learn lessons. We make mistakes, and that's where we're really learning and growing. And I think that all of you can relate to instances where you thought, yeah, I would like to go back and redo that. I recognize that message didn't land the way that I would have wanted it to. I was, yes, authentic, but maybe a little too quick, or not thinking through the longer term implication of what I was saying there, or what have you. And I think that as you learn, it's through those experiences that allow us to take those breaths and stop and say, okay, no, I'm gonna wait on that one, or I'm gonna give it a moment and then phrase it this way instead. And I think that to a certain extent, we have to all have that experience before we're able to do it. It's really difficult to train that in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a learned feel.
Next question.
Hi, my question is, have you ever had a direct supervisor give you feedback in a one-on-one situation about something, or like a constructive criticism about something related to your personality that I guess you consider part of your authentic self, and they're maybe asking you to change that or tailor that somehow differently to your role?
You mean something that might be stereotypically female?
Not necessarily, but yeah, that could be.
Yeah, so mine was, I kind of agreed with it, so it was kind of hard. But we have in our performance reviews, we've called them different things throughout the years, but they're like right now they're value-based competencies, as things might be like integrity, teamwork, blah, blah, blah. So he's going through and he's evaluating me on these, and he said, unfortunately, we don't have one that's called tact, because I would rate you low on tact. And he wasn't trying to be a jerk about it, but it kind of goes back to what I've talked about, because I'm kind of like, yeah, I totally saw what he was talking about, but so it wasn't about being something stereotypically female. It was something about being very much Stacy. And but so it was he wasn't telling me not to raise the issues. He was telling me to try to be a little bit more tactful with it. So he actually did it in the right manner. But yeah, but I haven't had anybody try to like squelch me on the other stuff. I also tend to be a little bit blind when somebody's trying to give me subtle hints to do that, because sometimes people will give you subtle hints about trying to change something, and I don't get it because I feel like, well, if they need to do something, they need to tell me and not just beat around the bush with it. So maybe people tried to tell me and I didn't listen or get it. I didn't get it.
I haven't really ever had that kind of direct feedback that you're asking about, but I am a woman and a non-engineer, actually, even though my background is in tech comm and I've worked with engineers and technical specialists my entire career, so I'm a keen observer of this species. I am, but and I love you all dearly. That's why I've chosen this career path. But I am. It's true. I'm not an engineer by training, and so I'm always aware of that. And so I'm always sort of feeling a little bit the other in my engineering world because I am not the engineer. And so, I'm aware of that. So it's not necessarily a female thing for me. It's the outsiderness comes from something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and mine is very similar to Stacy's. It's really the messaging. It's the communication method. It's the types of words you're choosing to convey something. And I've had probably every manager I've had tell me that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm aware. I have to think twice then about, how to phrase something. And I feel like I'm sitting there thinking so much about what I'm going to say that I'm missing the opportunity to say it. So sometimes I might just blurt it out depending on what group I'm in, if it's kind of a safe zone and I know the people that I'm there with. But it's hard to train yourself to be fully aware and to actually change it. Mm-hmm. So.
Yes, and I think what's also been in the theme among some of these questions, before we go on to another question, is part of the authentic self is knowing some of those, I don't know if you'd even call them weaknesses, but areas where you can improve, opportunities, whatever you want to call them, being aware of those. But if you continually focus on those, right, and instead, not capitalize on your strengths, right, you can really get down in those weeds and not really progress. And so I think that, and I just, knowing some of these ladies more than others, I just know the progression and what it takes, in here. And so that concept of, okay, yeah, that may be that, and every manager I've had has said that. Okay, recognizing that, doing something about it, but moving forward. It hasn't stalemated, right, these ladies. So something to think about. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we talk a lot about tact and the fine line we have to walk as professional women. We feel like we have to be buttoned up. We have to be constantly thinking about our messaging and what we're doing. So tact, that has come up a lot. Do you think that women are expected stereotypically to be tactful? Let's flip this the other way.
We say it in stereo.
So no, because I think I'm going to say something opposite. In my situation, there are quite a few people in this room who know me very well. I don't have tact. This is not a gender thing. I'm just
don't
like,
you know a lot of
there.
men who have no tact? Let's flip this 180 degrees.
Yeah, so we're going to let her talk a minute because I think we disagree.
Where we have an upper level manager that is rude, crude, and socially unacceptable, racist, sexist, drops the F-bomb.
So I'm not
he gets
talking...
no feedback on that, and he's not told to be tactful. How do you deal with that when this person may be against your values, the way they behave at work, the ideas and values they communicate?
Maybe we can, because I think that's two different things. So first of all, I don't have tact. This is not about me getting inappropriate feedback that just because I'm a woman. Mm-hmm. So in that specific one, and I want to hear from you, and then maybe because I think you led into a different question, which we want to answer too. But.
Yeah.
So you go with your, because we disagree on that. But yeah.
Well, we might disagree, but I also like the fact that we disagree, because I like the fact that you recognize that as something different, and I'm not going to disagree with you there, right? I think your experience is your experience.
I saw head nods when I said
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, well, but I do also agree with Tracy that there are certainly instances that I've seen in my career where if I were a man, or if another female colleague were a man, and she were doing or making the same decision or communicating in that particular way, there wouldn't be blowback or any kind of, yeah, not at all, not at all. So I do think, however, that some of that is changing. I see it at every level, from my own kids to, some undergrads that I come in contact with, to my grad students out in the field. So I definitely, in my career trajectory, have seen those winds starting to shift. We're not there yet, totally, where, everyone is judged equally, completely. But yeah, I do think that that's there. I'm not going to invalidate your experience, though, either. I think that it's probably accurate also.
Women are, professional women, especially at the managerial level, are so professional at work that you really have to dig for those little tiny things to coach them on. And maybe tact is one thing they might pull out of the air, but
that's a very nice thing to say.
Stereotypical thing to coach women on.
Yeah, I do think that there's a little bit of an expectation that women are going to be a little bit. They're gonna come ready with that toolkit that men aren't expected to bring to work with them.
They're never judged on that, especially if they're at a high successful level. They just say, "Oh, that's the way he is." Don't expect him to change.
Yep. No, I agree.
Okay. All right, we have more questions. Awesome.
Hi, so I'm a mechanical engineering student at Michigan State, and I'm just wondering, is this on?
You're loud.
Okay. I was just wondering, for those students who are getting into internships or just starting off their career, kind of how do you go about being your authentic self at work and kind of like speaking your mind without coming off as like offending other people, or especially like those with more experience coming off as like a know-it-all and thinking you know more when you have lesser experience?
Yeah, I have a great. So I had two interns several years ago, and one was a man and one was a woman. And the man, in his final end of intern report out type thing, you would have had no idea he was an intern. He got up there, he said, "This is what we did, this is what we didn't do, this is what we could do better, this is the results, blah, 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 blah." The woman got up there and she's like, "Well, I'm just an intern, but come on, you guys, you got to talk to each other. Nobody talked to each other the whole time I was here." And it just was like this horrible sort of comparison between the two, because the woman kept quiet the whole summer and didn't share that her team members weren't talking to each other, where the guy was in there, part of the team, getting everybody to work together. So some of it, it's you don't, and I'll tell you, never, for the students in the room or collegiates, never say, "I'm just an intern." Do not do that. So, but part of it is the fact that she observed all this and sat back, and maybe she was worried about being seen as a know-it-all, or because she started off by saying she was just an intern, so maybe she felt she was just an intern and nobody wanted to listen to her. And so she had something to contribute, and she didn't contribute. And I think had she sat in this session and been her authentic self, she could have brought that towards her. And the guy just did it naturally. I mean, and so it was just side by side, this horrible comparison.
Go ahead.
I also think that having curiosity is really important. So to your concern about the know-it-all issue, you walk into an organization and anybody will tell you who's had multiple jobs over their career, it takes a good year to really get the flavor of an organization. You know it enough to be really dangerous after 6 months, but a good year until you really have the whole sense of what's going on in that work ecology. And so having curiosity, asking piles of questions, and then really, really paying attention to the answers to those questions is going to get you super far. Listening carefully, is going to get you super far. So that's the way to not come off as a know-it-all. People always want to talk about what they do. They always want to teach and tell people more about, the interesting things they're doing or even the problems that they're trying to solve. And you'll learn the fastest and get the most out of the experience if you come into it with that curiosity. And in the end, you'll be able to stand up and give the presentation that says, I was here, and we learned a lot, and we did a lot. And you'll be saying it we, not I. That's important.
And I think Christine alluded to it too. It's really the culture of that company that you join, and just listening and paying attention to how other people react and how other people talk to one another, what transpires in meetings, just understanding what that communication norm is goes a long ways. Because if you see people speaking out and just speaking their mind, that's probably accepted there. But you can be in a lot of cultures where it's not. And you have to understand what's a good point for you to chime in, or what's a good point for you to maybe communicate more to your manager versus a team. And it's really going to change for every single company you look at.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. And I think what you'll find more, at our company, we hire interns to solve problems. And you may have just 3 months to do it. You may have 6 months to do it, depending on it. And I think it's important to realize that you're not just an intern. And actually, a lot of times your title is, supplier quality engineer / intern. It's last, right? You're part of the program, and you're an engineer, And so I think it's really important. And to your point, Stacy, it's really unfortunate that that individual, right? So it's good to recognize that and get these examples, and you're part of the team, right? Next question. All right.
This kind of relates to how to discern your true self, because as a college student right now, I'm in that process of trying to figure out what it is I want to do. And I'm always curious to talk to people in their profession, how they got to that point. And so I just wanted to ask you, did you always kind of know that you wanted to get to the point where you are today? Or how did that journey play out for you to figure out who you really are and how you can show that through your job?
Great question.
It's interesting. I've done a couple different types of panel discussions with a lot of students too. And I know you had mentioned they want to take your career path and go with it. And it's like, I couldn't have planned out where I am today. There's no way I could have said 20 years ago, this is where I'm going to be. It's just a matter of opportunities you get, people that you meet, things that you learn, things that stick really well with you. You develop yourself. You understand what you can do really well with. And other people recognize that too. So that moves you into different roles and different types of positions. But I don't think it's something you can really predict in advance. I know there's some people that are very driven and they're like, I'm going to be VP by the time I'm 40, and they do it. But I think that's unusual. I really do.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, that I think there are a couple different kinds of people. Those who set their sights on something and then set their compass and try their damnedest to get there. And then those of us who really do treat it more like a journey. Mm-hmm. So, on a journey, sometimes you're going to miss that cab and you're going to have to take the next one. Or, the train is going to run 5 minutes late. And that's the way it's going to be, and that's going to change the way that your journey plays out. And that's okay. That's how I've let my career develop. I've taken interesting twists and turns, and I love it. But I still don't necessarily know what I want to do when I grow up, and that's still evolving for me. And that's what makes it fun for me.
Yeah, I think my biggest, I obviously wanted to advance in my career and all that type of stuff, but the mantra I have always gone after is I've wanted to have rewarding work, and I wanted to have a boss that appreciated me. And for the most part, I've had very good bosses in my career, some better than others, but for the most part, pretty good bosses. And I've had some really rewarding work. Now, maybe if I had had this, I want to be VP, I would have been a little bit more driven and done some other things. But mine was always rewarding work and be appreciated by my boss. And along the way, it was just, I wanted to enjoy the journey. And part of, for me to enjoy the journey is just to have some fun with it. And so I do. I am committed to be able to tell a joke, even though they say don't start with a joke. And so it's like I started this little book. It was called Stacy's Politically politically correct joke book, and so we joke that it was the PCJB. And so I was writing this PCJB, politically correct joke book. And so it is, it's like all these stupid things that could not offend anyone in the world. And it's a pretty small book, but I should add that one. But anyway, so I mean, part of it is just to have that, to lighten it up, because that's me. I like stupid, corny stuff, and I think that adds into that whole thing about enjoying the journey. Having rewarding work, a boss that appreciates me, and then just enjoying it along the way, because you never know what'll happen.
Actually, one thing to add to that. As you guys were talking, I was thinking about this too. So before I took on my current role, I was with the company that was phasing out an office in Madison. So I knew I had to look for a new job. And I actually had 3 offers at the same time. And I had to decide which of those 3 offers to take. 2 of them had the exact same title, just different companies. And the third one was really staying with the company I was with, getting a promotion with the potential of being a VP in 3 years. And I turned it down. And I turned it down because that wasn't really what I wanted. That wasn't my authentic self. That company didn't really match what I wanted to be doing. Plus, it would have also required me to move. And with my family situation, I just wasn't interested in doing that. So I took a director role instead, but then between the 2 director positions, one would have had me reporting directly into the chief operating officer and being his right-hand man. So it was a learning opportunity. And that excited me more than the other position with the exact same title name. So you kind of have to think through, what do you really want to get out of something? Because it's not often an easy selection, but kind of go through that motion of thinking through those advantages and disadvantages.
Really great. Okay, next question. Yep, we have a few.
So one of the things I wonder about in today's world of technology and global workforce is, how do you translate your authentic self through the digital media to people you never get to meet?
So I teach this.
I know you do.
I'll go through my whole lesson on this. No, interestingly enough, our voices communicate a great deal. And one of the best tips I can give you, if you are working on a global team, is get some voice training or do it yourself. There are tons of tools available online to help you do voice training. And the reason that's important is because we can hear smiles over the phone. We can hear facial expressions over the phone. And those are how we communicate, right? They're really important. So I teach online, and when I first started teaching online, I realized this is really hard for me to do because I have this whole different thing that I do in a classroom, and I feel really connected to my students, and now all of a sudden I'm not seeing them, and they're not seeing me, and I meet with them once a week live, and they can hear my voice, but I was being very professional, and giving my lessons, and and putting everyone to sleep. So I started realizing I need to play with this. This is my one medium that I have to communicate my authentic self. And I better make pretty good use of it. So I started doing some of this training. And interestingly, you can learn a lot from other fields, theater, voice. Check it out. Learn your range and use it. It comes in handy not only in this situation, but it also comes in handy in your real life, because you can be so much more controlled in how you're coming across. You will feel a lot more confident and be able to communicate in a lot more nuance than you could normally. It's just nice too. It's fun. It's something totally different. But that's probably the best way I know of. And then of course there's the interpersonal stuff too. You still have to do all the things we talked about, but you have to do it, over the phone. But voice communicates so much.
I'm not going to top that.
I know we have a few more on this side, so 3 more questions. Okay.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Perfect.
All right, so mine is related to kind of evaluating what your authentic self is and if it has ever come from places that you weren't expecting. You've talked about assessments and bosses and stuff. For my example, my husband often comes up with very insightful things and perfectly explains things that I do, and I'm like, oh, I do that. But he can make the connection over it and has actually helped me understand myself more, and I help him understand him more. And then, I don't know, I'm just wondering if it's ever come from an instance where you weren't expecting.
Yeah, so mine has come over the years. I really have pride myself on trying to get to know myself really well, but when I reflect back on it and some of the things people have said, I've had coworkers talk about some situation when they were like, yeah, don't you remember back in 1990 when Alan was yelling at us because we were talking in the back at the bulletin board or something? And I'm like, I have no idea what he was talking about. Like, none. I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And my husband was sitting there, and my husband said, she doesn't remember anything negative, so she has no idea what you're talking about. And so this has become this mantra, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think he's right. So,
Yeah.
And part of that is maybe why I'm like a happy person, because in general, I just don't remember the negative stuff. But I did not realize that myself until I had literally no memory of this event that my coworker was like traumatized on for these past 30 years.
It's a new condition that we're going to name after Stacy. Okay. We have one more. Yep, over here, Jean.
Oh, there's one.
Yeah, her hand has been up for a long time.
Okay.
Okay, so since going into a technical professional field, have you ever experienced any difficulty or awkwardness talking to people that you grew up with, or even your family, depending on like what their careers or background is? Either talking about your job or explaining, I don't want to say explaining a concept or something to them, but, you know, how do you not come off as a know-it-all sometimes to just even your family? Because, you know, as an engineer, it's like now you have this different set of knowledge and sometimes you feel like a jerk, I guess.
I have to admit, I have one brother, and I rarely talk about what I do at work with him. And mainly it's because he's an attorney, and I don't really care about what he does at work. So I don't want to reciprocate it, and I honestly don't think he has a clue what I do. I really don't. However, like, my mom knows absolutely nothing technical, and she can carry on a long conversation just because she cares. So she'll just ask questions, which I think is great. And she may not understand half the things I talk about, but she's able to kind of keep that conversation going. And there's a lot of friends like that too, that they don't quite know what I do on a daily basis, but they're sympathetic, they're empathetic. You know, they're willing to listen and ask questions.
I'll also say that, and I've already outed myself that I'm not an engineer, but I'll also say that I think that it's not just engineering and technical professions that are difficult to explain sometimes what we do on a day-to-day basis. Just about every profession has its idiosyncrasies and specific set of knowledge that is just, you know, tricky to try to translate to others. And so we have to be, you know, empathetic to that. And then I will also say that if you're in a position where you want to challenge yourself to try to explain what you do in more simple terms or to make analogies to help others understand, that's actually going to be seriously beneficial to you. Because even within your own organization, even within your own team, there are going to be multiple times where you're going to need to explain what you do without teaching them everything about what you do. And that's a really big misstep that a lot of engineers make, is thinking, well, and if you need to know about this, I'm going to need to tell you every single thing. And it's
Very
not.
Good. Yeah.
So just be wary of that. Find a way to back up and say, okay, well, what is this like that is something that they could relate to? You know, what's an analogy that I could use to explain what I do? You know, am I trying to stir a pot of peanut butter when I'm mixing this particular solution or whatever, right? Just give them something to grasp onto from an everyday perspective. That's going to be really helpful to you both in work and out of work. So something to think about.
And so I have a 18-year-old niece. So, and she likes chemistry. Her dad is my brother, who's an engineer also, and her mom is a stay-at-home mom who does not have a college degree. And she's fabulous. She's a great, I mean, I like her as a person. I have no issues with her. However, as her oldest daughter was getting ready to go to school, to choose a major, choose a school, and she likes chemistry, and she's debating between majoring in chemistry or majoring in pharmacy. And her mother is giving her advice on maybe you want to do pharmacy because then you could have some more flexibility as you become a mother, and maybe you could work part-time. And her mother, who has never worked, and this is being taped, I hope she never sees this tape because Janine, I love you. But anyway, but so her mother's giving her advice on what it's going to be like to be a professional woman. And I think I'm pretty safe in saying I pretty much devoted my life to advocating for women and helping women with their professional careers. And I could not, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of a know-it-all in this area, and I couldn't even like broach the discussion with any respect from her or somewhat my niece that I might know a little bit about this space. And it crushes me because I was like, I think I have something to share and I can't even get attention. She's like totally listening to her mother, which that's like a good thing. She's listening to her mother. But on the same hand, I think I have more to share for her. And so I don't, maybe with the next niece, I'll be able to have more of an audience. So I get like multiple tries at this one. But, and she's decided to go into pharmacy, and I think that, she's going to do well. But it's also is like, I didn't know how to like get in there and do what you're saying without coming across like a know-it-all and be really demeaning to her, because she has a lot to offer as my niece's mother, but to kind of bring me into that discussion. So it's kind of a fail on this one, but maybe the next one, catch me in a couple of years.
Okay, one more question. And there was on this side, or where were we going to go, Jean? Okay. Great questions, by the way.
Hi, I'm Allison Bell from Michigan State. My question was if you think your transparency is what helped you get to your respective positions, or if there's some other key to leadership.
I think it's helped me be a better manager, which probably has helped me get into higher level positions because I've had teams that have totally backed me and I've backed them. And again, it does kind of go to getting to know people personally as well. That's helped in that regard. With management, it's tricky to understand how transparent you can be, though. There's certain things that you simply can't disclose, or there's times when you can't disclose things. So there's always things that you have to kind of keep a little bit quiet until the right point in time. And then it's a matter of how do you communicate that effectively.
I'm still thinking.
Yeah, I think some of the things we've talked about almost with, being blunt and quick to speak up can be stereotypical male characteristics. So, I'm the person that interrupts because I don't pause and I just want to say it. And a lot of times we talk about how the men are doing that to the women, and so I'm right in there with that. So on that front, I think it probably has helped me. But then I also think couching it just a little bit more professionally probably would have helped me some. So I think it's been a dual-edged sword.
And for me, it's a little different because I am in education. And so my job, if I'm doing it well, if I'm giving the most value to my students and my clients, I'm giving them a lot of feedback, sometimes really pointed and personal feedback because I teach communications. So what I have to be really aware of is when to turn that off. It's hard for me to do that. I'm assessing all the time. And so I need to learn how to say, nope, not an appropriate time to say, you really could do this differently, because not everyone's looking for that if they're not in my classes or they're not hiring me to do that work. So, so yes and no. Yes, it's helped me get where I am, and I feel like I'm very good at it, but I have to learn how to turn it off too.
Very good. Thank you so much to our distinguished panelists for sharing your insights and your career paths. And basically, how I look at this session is, first of all, you were your authentic self. I mean, we saw it in this, hour and 15, right? It was hour and 15. And, what's important, I think, for that is for our audience to see that and make it okay for them to be that way as well. So I appreciate you guys being here with us. Let's give them a round of applause.